There is a strange and problematic phenomenon that can occur when the general public sees a criminal's face and neglects to acknowledge the dark acts that the individual may have committed. It is evident that social media can be more harmful than beneficial in various ways, including when the outward appearance of an indicted criminal causes a significant crime to be disregarded and ignored. More so, we often see physically attractive criminals being praised and put onto pedestals because of their accepted features. When this occurs, we are often left with an inherent disregard for the evil that may lurk within their minds. With the clip you just watched, this is exactly what has happened. Actual footage from the trial of 18-year-old Isabella Guzman. Though her case occurred back in 2013, the noteworthy footage from her appearance in court has recently resurfaced online, specifically on the social media platform TikTok. One would hope that the footage would serve as an example of a criminal who lacks any remorse whatsoever. Still, the video has instead become infamous as a result of TikTok users finding Isabella's demeanor cute. Online, the court footage has been dubbed over with musician Ava Max's hit song Sweet But Psycho, implying that Isabella's looks make her worthy of praise. Since going viral, the video of Sweet But Psycho Isabella Guzman has become the center of a new TikTok challenge. One in which young girls who resemble Isabella dress up in orange t-shirts to mimic the criminal's jumpsuit and give their best impression of her infamous facial expressions. Perhaps the most terrifying part about the Sweet But Psycho challenge is that those who have participated in it do not know anything about the heinous crime committed by the young woman they are fawning over. So, what is the story behind this seemingly innocent woman, whose face is plastered all over the internet for all the wrong reasons? What is up, Iwu crew? Today we are going to be discussing the chilling case of Isabella Guzman. The goal of this video is to educate the public on the horrifying story of a temper gone bad, and to hopefully stress the importance of understanding the context of crimes in a documentary-style format. If you enjoy true crime and mysteries, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Isabella Guzman was born and raised in Aurora, Colorado, with her two biological parents, Yunmi Hoy and Robert Guzman. Shortly after Isabella was born, her parents decided that the family they had built together was not meant to last. As a result, Yunmi and Robert ended up getting a divorce when Isabella was a toddler. Going through a divorce is difficult for any child, and for Isabella, one can assume there was a sense of pain and isolation that came with watching her mother fall in love again. Within the first few years after her parents' initial divorce, Isabella saw her mother begin a relationship with a man named Ryan Hoy. Though Ryan was legally Isabella's stepfather, Isabella was never very fond of her mother's choice to eventually remarry. Throughout her childhood and early adolescence, Isabella often argued with her mother. They became extremely heated with each other, to the point that they concerned those who witnessed these disputes. When Isabella was around 7 years old, the constant fighting with her mother had become too much for Yunmi and Ryan to handle. As a result, her mother and stepfather ended up sending Isabella to go live permanently with her father for a few years. During some of her key developmental years, Isabella was mostly removed from her mother's care in an effort to diffuse the inexplicable tension between the two. At the time, no one could have predicted how detrimental this decision would turn out to be, as the divide between Isabella and her mother only expanded as a result of their separation. In her late teenage years, Isabella ended up moving back in with her mother and stepfather and returned to a semi-consistent schedule between time spent at her mother's house and time spent at her father's. Though Yoon-mi and Ryan had hoped that the general relations between Isabella and her mother would improve as Isabella got older, they were overall disappointed to find out that time apart had not made the heart grow fonder. Rather, Isabella had allegedly become more threatening and disrespectful toward her mother. Despite the severity of Isabella's behavior, everyone in her family assumed that the attitude issues would eventually pass. But everyone was so very wrong. Around midday on Wednesday, August 28, 2013, Yoon-mi received a rather ominous and worrisome email from Isabella, seemingly out of the blue. Upon reading over the cryptic message meant only for her, Yoon-mi expressed her growing concern to Ryan. As Ryan read over the email that essentially stated, "You will pay," a shiver went down his spine. The obnoxiously rude behavior that Ryan had witnessed Yoon-mi fall victim to over the years never sat right with him. He simply couldn't understand how a daughter could be so incessantly cruel to her own mother for no apparent reason. Yoon-mi knew that the verbal abuse she suffered from her daughter was by no means normal, but she had never truly believed that anything would ever come from it. Anything dangerous, that is. Nonetheless, as Yoon-mi continued to read Isabella's threatening email over and over again, she felt increasingly more nervous and off-put by the message it conveyed. Whether it was a result of the years of disturbing arguments between the two, or just the tone of the email she had received that day, Yoon-mi made an important decision. She would protect herself at all costs. Yoon-mi picked up the phone and dialed 911, explaining to the dispatcher that she was concerned enough with her daughter's behavior that she was ready to admit that she needed help and possibly protection. When authorities arrived at the Hoy household just moments later, they spoke briefly with Yoon-mi, who once again relayed the context of her concerns to the officers. After gaining a better understanding of the extremely strained mother and daughter relationship, the officers made their way inside to speak directly with Isabella herself. The conversation was primarily one-sided, as the police lectured Isabella on the importance of treating her mother kindly and the impact that empty threats can have on the people involved. What they didn't know at the time was that Isabella's threats were anything but empty. Isabella's conversation with police ended with the officers expressing the notion that ultimately Isabella was living in her mother's house. If she didn't shape up soon, her mother could very easily kick Isabella out for her disrespectful behavior. So, while Isabella was being chewed out for her ill-mannered attitude toward her mother, the ever-present anger within her continued to fester. After the police left the Hoy residence, Yoon-mi decided to do something she rarely ever did, as she made her way out the door to work. She called her ex-husband. After recounting the day's events to him, Robert reassured Yoon-mi that he would have a talk with Isabella himself. Robert was well aware of his daughter's tumultuous relationship with her biological mother, but he had not known the full extent of their more recent disputes. Not long after Yoon-mi had left for work, Robert made his way to her home to visit Isabella. On that afternoon, Robert remarked, "I went to talk to Isabella and we sat down in the backyard, looking at the trees and the animals, and I started to talk to her about the respect that people should have for their parents. And I was trying to let her know that she should be obedient to her parents, not rebellious, that she should try to listen more and everything was going fine. In the conversation, I thought that I made progress, but obviously it didn't do nothing because hours later this thing happened." The thing that Robert Guzman referenced was the chilling crime scene that his daughter had managed to create in her own home just 3 hours after their heart-to-heart talk. Yoon-mi came home from work that night around 9:30 p.m. to find her husband, Ryan, having dinner downstairs. As per her usual routine, Yoon-mi ascended the staircase in their home, intending to strip the clothes away from her body and hop directly into the hottest shower her home's plumbing could manage. When she reached the top of the staircase, Yoonmi realized that Isabella's bedroom door had been shut, with Isabella likely locked in behind it. Thankful for the moment of peace she was given after a long and emotional day, Yoonmi let herself into the bathroom down the hall and prepared for her shower. Not long after the shower started running, Ryan heard something strange from his position in the dining room just downstairs. At first, the only thing Ryan heard was a low thumping sound coming from the direction of the upstairs bathroom. And then, he heard the screaming. Suddenly, Ryan realized with terrifying certainty that he had heard the sound of his wife desperately calling out his name, followed by barely audible moans for help. Ryan quickly jumped up from the dining room table and rushed upstairs as fast as he could. As he did so, he understood that the sound of the shower running was making it hard for him to hear what exactly was going on in the restroom, just on the other side of the door. In a desperate attempt to potentially stop whatever was going on inside the bathroom, Ryan tried as hard as he could to push his way in. Despite his efforts, he couldn't make the door budge more than an inch or so before it was pushed back against him with an insane amount of force. As he tried time and time again to muster up the strength to overtake the door, he caught a glimpse of Isabella. Her eyes were dull and her expression blank as she managed to push back against the door with all her might and successfully close it. Before he knew it, Ryan found himself stuck on the other side of the door, locked and completely unaware of the horrific acts that were happening just feet away from him. And then he saw the blood seeping out from the crack in the doorframe. In a panic, Ryan dashed back downstairs to grab his cell phone from the couch where he had left it. As soon as the device was in his hands, Ryan dialed 911 as he listened to the helpless screams coming from the upstairs bathroom. Once connected with an operator, Ryan expressed that he believed that his wife was being attacked, and not just by anyone, but by his own stepdaughter. Still on the line with the dispatcher, Ryan ran back upstairs in hopes that this time he would have better luck opening the bathroom door. As he approached the bathroom once more, he heard Yoonmi croak out in a barely audible voice, "Jehovah." And then the bathroom door opened. Standing over the body of her lifeless mother, Isabella Guzman emerged from the room with a knife in her hand and blood pooling at her feet. With the knife pointed downward in her right hand, Isabella said nothing as she stared straight ahead and walked right past Ryan. Without so much as looking back at either her victim or her dumbfounded stepfather, Isabella Guzman walked down the staircase and straight out the front door, wearing only a pink athletic bra and a pair of turquoise shorts.
The female is going to be armed with a knife. She's an 18-year-old female. It says mixed race. I think it might be with Asian. She's wearing a pink tank top, shorts, one shoe.
Taken aback and confused as to what exactly had happened, Ryan forced himself to investigate the bathroom and take in the scene before him. Lying naked on the cold, blood-soaked linoleum floor was the unmoving body of Yoonmi. Ryan found himself unable to look away as he examined the deep slashes on her neck, face, and chest, and the plethora of stab wounds that had caused her to bleed profusely. He noticed then that there was even a baseball bat nestled under the small of her back. The scene was so gruesome and horrifying, and it felt as though Ryan was in some kind of nightmarish horror film that he so desperately wanted to end. Following the 911 dispatcher's instructions, Ryan tried to open his wife's airway and perform CPR. Despite his efforts, Ryan knew deep inside that the blank expression on Yoonmi's face meant that she was already dead. No amount of CPR could manage to bring her back to life. As soon as the police arrived at the Hoy residence, they discovered that Yoonmi had sustained 31 stab wounds to the face and 48 stab wounds to the neck. She was reported dead on arrival. As he choked back tears, Ryan Hoy recounted the events of the evening to police. The investigation regarding Yoonmi's brutal murder began right away, and their primary suspect was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until the next morning, August 29, 2013, that investigators gained some insight as to where Isabella had managed to run off to. Aurora officers received a tip from an anonymous 911 call around 11:30 a.m. that allegedly stated that a body had been discovered inside a car in the parking garage on South Parker Road. Police called in undercover officers to help search the garage alongside a canine search party. The car was then approached, but there was no body to be found. Only other evidence that pointed towards Isabella and the homicide. Yet Isabella didn't stay hidden for long, as soon enough she was seen walking out of the garage, causing 3 surrounding officers to pull out their guns. After a 16-hour manhunt, Isabella was arrested swiftly and rather peacefully for the murder of her 47-year-old mother. In the viral video of her hearing, Isabella is seen wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles on her wrists and legs, listening closely to the presiding judge read the complaint against her. As remarked by news outlets and individuals online, Isabella Guzman does not necessarily look like a stereotypical criminal, let alone a murderer. Toward the end of her hearing, Isabella appeared to tear up a bit before looking directly into the courtroom camera and seemingly making light of her tears. It is clear from the look on her face that she felt little to no remorse for her actions. Later into her trial, Isabella entered an insanity plea. After much deliberation, the judge accepted the plea after a psychological evaluation found that Isabella had been suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Since her trial, Isabella has been receiving treatment for her mental illness at Pueblo Psychiatric Hospital in Colorado. And now, all these years later, the video of 18-year-old Isabella Guzman has resurfaced online. More so than that, it has become something of a joke across social media platforms, a not-so-friendly reminder that the sweet but psycho girl who stood in that Arapahoe County courtroom managed to avoid serving time in prison for the brutal murder of her own mother. Next time, be sure to think twice before blindly hopping onto a TikTok trend. You never know what truths are hidden behind the surface of a seemingly harmless viral video.